I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first keynote speaker. Mike Vinje is the Small Business Technology Manager at Kennedy Space Center, where he leads the KSC, SBIR, STTR activities and assists with the technology development. Prior to this role, Mike served as one of KSC's Commercial Partnership Development Managers, where he helped KSC transition to the busy multi-user spaceport it is today. He assumed these roles in 2014. And throughout his career, he has witnessed firsthand the massive changes enabled by new technology, and he looks forward to helping this industry drive more change into the future. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Vinje.
We're going to start with a video from NASA.
Okay, let's say looks like it.
Do next. So my name is Mike Vinje, and I've spoken to several of you in the past few days. Let me see if I can figure this out. What the heck are these buttons? Good, thank you. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about the SBIR, STTR program, but I also want to take a moment to talk about some of the things that I've seen in the last few days, and just make a suggestion. Now, if you've been at the lunch where I was able to do a little bit of a talk, I made a suggestion for the folks in this community. And to be succinct, I would suggest, as we're all talking, that we all have a lot of things that we're trying to get done. And we all can help each other. It's really a strong technology ecosystem that's grown up in the new space industry. And I think it's interesting because so many different businesses and teams are going in so many different directions that a lot of times we're really not competitors, and we can help each other. So I would like to reinforce what I was saying earlier, that as you're talking to different people, make sure you lead with what you need. We can all help each other, but if we don't know what it is that we need from each other, it's hard to see with the connections and help do the networking. So please be upfront as you're talking to folks. Hey, in my case, so I work for NASA, but what I'm looking for, what I need, is to meet new high-tech startup companies that are thinking of entering the space arena, because we've got something for them. So in the future, as you bump into a company like that, maybe you'll think of me and you'll be able to make a connection. That's sort of a community approach I'd like to encourage, and I think the new space community is a really strong one, but part of the strength is because we can all help each other. We're all climbing up out of this hole to get into space. So it's a really good environment for that, and it's great to be a part of it. So the SBIR program is essentially a really good entry place into this space industry, particularly for companies that are looking to sort of receive some sort of accreditation or to make their mark, so to speak. The program itself has been around for a while. The $3.3 billion so far has gone to small businesses through the SBIR programs, and that number, of course, increases every year. So when we talk SBIR, there's actually two programs: Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Technology Transfer Research. And the politicians were the ones that came up with those names, so don't blame me. The basic difference between the two, if you've ever wondered, the SBIR work, small businesses can do that work entirely on their own, submit proposals, receive awards. STTR, the small business has to be partnered with a research institute. So in the cases where you have a business that's coming out of a university, say it's a graduate student or a faculty or something that's doing something, the STTR program works really well for that. So if you've ever heard the two different programs, that's really the only difference. The same process happens. There are different subtopics for each program, but in terms of how the overall flow goes, they're very similar. In terms of participation, we've had 12,000 firms in 50 states. We have a strong effort to try to make sure every single state has participation. And we also put a lot of effort into making sure we hit the underutilized states, the underserved states as well. For example, there's SBIR road tours. And I've done it, several other folks have done it, where we literally get on a bus and we're going from city to city for 5 days to try to hit different areas where NASA's never been or where the aerospace community has never been. Because as you all know, there's some real diamonds in the rough out there of folks who have got some really innovative ideas. The SBIR program is something that's spread over many federal agencies. And that's an important fact, and I'll get to in a little later with the phase 3, but these are the different federal agencies that have an SBIR program. Essentially what happens is if a federal agency does any kind of research and development at all, the SBIR legislation says they have to take a chunk of that R&D and it has to go to small businesses. Now, in terms of what this is for STTR, but in terms of in general, what's the general requirements? Small business for us means less than 500 employees, which I think probably fits a lot of folks. And then the other thing too is that you have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident alien, and that the work is basically done inside the U.S. It's a federal program meant for U.S. companies. That being said, I want to point out real early that I think there's a lot of international sales opportunities for SBIR companies. Once you have developed the technology, we're more than happy with companies that can gain international customers for the technology. This is the basics of the program. You have 3 phases. Phase 1 is kind of the concept study, and it's meant to basically give the small business some time to put together the technology development plan and to test out some theories and see how things work. At the end of phase 1, the companies are eligible to submit a phase 2 proposal. The phase 2 is really more where the hardware gets built, the software gets developed, and the phase 2 effort is a 2-year program, is a 2-year effort for $750K of funding. Now phase 3 is basically the company being able to generate sales off of the work that they've done. So when you hear of a SBIR or STTR phase 3 contract, that basically just means that company has been able to generate additional work just because of the SBIR proposal that they put in. It's sort of like a catch-all miscellaneous contract. There's also other programs or other efforts that we do to put in additional money, particularly for times where we have a technology that's very promising but just needs a little more work to be fully utilized. We have things like a phase 2E program, and there's also a couple other things that we'll get into in a little bit later. What we're trying to do more and more is we're trying to leverage resources in industry as well. So we'll go and contribute some funds if the company can demonstrate that there's a commercial partner that's also willing to put some money in. So there's a lot of leverage opportunities. And if you're outside of the SBIR program, do be aware of that. If you see something that's promising, you might be able to provide the missing piece of funding, and the government will match that, and you may be able to meet your goals a lot more efficiently. There's several initiatives that we do as well. We're very interested, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do with the SBIR program is we're trying to build parts of the industry that we know we're going to need in the near future. So, for example, if we need some type of sensor or some type of equipment that doesn't exist, we'll put out a subtopic. We'll get companies invite companies to submit proposals, and we'll award funds. And over time, we'll be able to develop a basket of companies that are able to provide that technology, or at least we can provide that support, so that later on, when the NASA programs need that sort of technology, the companies exist. That part of industry is up and running. That's the real goal of the SBIR program from inside NASA, is we want to try to help carve out parts of the industry that we're going to need. And I should say that in previous times, like for example with the shuttle program, we would have a massive base of suppliers who would support us, and we had a lot of resources from that perspective. And I think going forward, it's a lot more efficient for us to try to help grow parts of the industry we know we're going to need, but more importantly, make sure that those companies are self-sufficient. Because we had a big problem in the shuttle program where we would get one or two specific components from a company, but then over time, it was really a real impact for that company that they would have to try to keep that sort of legacy equipment up and running and maintained. And so in terms of the company's viability, it was less and less attractive for them to be a supplier in the long run. But in the case of what we're trying to do with SBIR, our goal is to not only get what we need, but also to make sure that the companies are successful, so that we can basically pick stuff off the shelf when we need it, but not necessarily be the only customer for that company. To that end, one of the things that we're expanding with the SBIR program and the STTR program is our I-Corps participation. Essentially what I-Corps is, in a nutshell, it's a program that's designed to teach marketing and business development to the scientists and engineers that are within these companies. So should you submit a proposal for 2018 going forward, you can check a box to say that you have an interest in participating in the I-Corps program. If you win the award, then what the I-Corps program ends up doing is providing extra money on top of your award that allows you to go and travel and visit companies. And the gist of the I-Corps program that was set up, if you haven't been involved in it, essentially it boils down to learning how to really research the market. And I've heard a guideline that participants usually have to do 100 interviews of prospective customers to try to really shape what the demand is for their technology. And this is kind of a different mindset than most engineers or scientists. They're used to being in love with their technology, and of course everybody wants what they've designed, right? But having to look at it from the customer perspective and sort of reshape things makes them much more commercially viable, and that's why the I-Corps program has been working really well. But we're interested in the different types of efforts we can do to help companies become more solid and more commercially viable once they've received an award. To that end, well, there you go. Another thing we're doing is a commercialization assistance program, where basically, depending on what the need is for the company, we've got some other tools and resources that we can rely on. So, unlike a lot of government procurement efforts, where we're very interested in keeping something of a distance, a professional distance, we kind of consider the SBIR companies as a community that we want to help grow as well. Now, in order to really have a strong proposal, you really got to know your customer. And in the case of NASA, there's focus areas that we have, and we try to make a strong effort to put all of our long-range strategic plans out to where they're publicly available. This is what you see here is these focus areas are how we've divided our solicitation, but it also lines up very closely with the technology roadmaps that we have within NASA. And I invite you if you haven't already to kind of dig into what NASA has in terms of strategic planning. You kind of get a sense of where we're planning to go, and basically we try to find the knowledge gaps that we have. We build subtopics related to those knowledge gaps, and see if we can fill out the portfolio. In terms of working with SBIR, the best thing, as usual, go to the website. But I want to give you a real quick version of how to efficiently see whether or not there's some opportunities as a small business within there. Basically, the best thing to do is to go to the website, take the solicitation, which we put out once a year, and basically just do a keyword search. The technologies that you're interested in, the ones that you want to pursue, do a keyword search of the solicitation. We have 90-something different subtopics in there, and almost every time people are surprised at what subtopic actually is needing the technology that they're looking for. There's a pretty diverse range of what we're looking for. Let's see what else we got. Another thing that we're doing is through NASA, we've got a Mentor-Protege Program that we'd like to also put out as well. So essentially, another step to helping these companies grow and be a part of the aerospace community. If they can find a mentor, then the mentor company, the Mentor-Protege Program is something where not only does the new company benefit from working with a more experienced company, the more experienced company can benefit from the innovation as well. And we're very interested in trying to set those things up, and it's a really strong strong method of building the companies. Some different examples of SBIR technologies. If you see here, what we basically like to do is when there's a success, we're very happy to point out these success stories, and essentially these companies can get a lot of free press from NASA promoting their stuff. So that's one of the benefits of working with the SBIR programs is when you have a win, when you knock it out of the park, we're happy to celebrate it with you. In this case, we got some medical equipment that we started off as being something for the ISS that's turned into more diagnostics equipment that helps here on Earth, of course. It's another example, a company put together you never know what it is that we need up there, but with space environment, the having to adapt the technology that's on Earth and make it work in the space environment, that a lot of times it takes a lot of innovation. So here's an example here where a company's just putting together battery chargers for the ISS and helping us out from that respect. Another example here, Honeybee Robotics. Honeybee Robotics is an interesting story because they're one of quite a few companies that had a lot of success within the SBIR program, but then grew to where they're no longer eligible, which is great for us. I mean, they got their wings, so to speak. They went over 500 employees. So Honeybee Robotics, as an example, was no longer able to compete, but at the same point, that's what we want. We want these companies to be solid and stable, and in the future, there'll be plenty of activity for companies like that. Something I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. Let's see if I can get back to phase threes. One of the surprising things that people don't realize about the SBIR program is part of the legislation says you are part of a competition when you're in the SBIR program. You've submitted a proposal, you're going up against other companies that are also trying to receive that work. It's a competitive process. The US government recognizes that by you submitting a proposal in the SBIR program, you have competed for that procurement. And so in terms of the regulations, once you've received an SBIR award, once you've received a phase 1 or phase 2 award, you've satisfied the competition requirements for government procurement. That means that if there is a government customer that has a need for your technology, that government customer does not have to go through the regular procurement process of putting out some kind of information to industry and having a competition and going through that whole process. They go direct to you because you went through the effort of going through the SBIR program and you already did your competition. So because people participate in the SBIR program, they are able to get what are essentially sole source contracts for their technology, not just from the agency that they got the SBIR award from, but any federal agency, all the way across the government. So there are situations where a company has developed technology for NASA, they received an award, a phase 1 award, and worked into phase 2 or what have you, and then someone in DoD decides, hey, we need that particular technology. It's an automatic procurement. It's not something where DoD has to go and start looking across and survey industry and put out any sort of competitive thing. And that's a very strong reason to be considering SBIR, particularly for companies that are trying to find their entry into the space industry. That particular part of it is kind of is not very well understood, but it's for some companies it's been extremely lucrative way of getting their foothold within the space industry. I think I want to stop here and see if folks have questions. I think we answered a lot of questions from the last lunch presentation for sure. No, I think everybody's already burned out. Oh, hey, we do have a question. Wonderful, thank you so much.
Hi, one of the things we learned when we talked to small companies who would like to have SBIRs is that the timeline at which they operate is too fast compared with the timeline with which the SBIR program operates. is there a reason for that sort of, is it something that enshrined in the law? Is that something you can do to align yourselves with the speed at which industry works?
It's a great question, and I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges. If you know more of the process, you kind of understand how the timing works. I've told folks inside NASA that who've thought about having their programs work with SBIR. Roughly speaking, it's about 3 years from when you say that you want to participate in SBIR to when you're holding the technology in your hand. 3 years on the NASA side. And where that comes from is, first we have to write the subtopic. Subtopic has to go through the different deliberations, and then the solicitation goes out. We have one solicitation a year. And so once the companies go and submit for that particular subtopic, they'll go through their phase 1, and then after the phase 1, we also have to do our down select for the phase 2. So we have a pretty rigorous ranking and review process that takes about a month and a half, roughly speaking, for the proposals. But just 2 years alone for a phase 2 project itself ends up making it to where by the end of that 2 years, that's where you end up with a 3-year sort of delay. I think the best way to look at SBIR is we definitely want to be working with the companies that have that kind of speed of execution, but SBIR is probably a better thing for sort of a back burner sort of activity. It's not really set up that well to be the primary one and only way that a company is achieving their business goals. It's much better to complement the regular practices that a company might do in terms of reacting to customers. But you are absolutely right. It's not going to, I'm not so sure it's ever going to get that much faster, but part of it is because we have such a rigorous review process that we're trying to make sure we're being fair and selecting the right companies. There are some rapid innovation funds and OTA and different sorts of instruments that are emerging quite a bit, particularly within the DoD world, and that's very encouraging. And if that can inject some speed into the SBIR process, that would be great. But it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I don't think that per se there's anything in the legislature that says that thou shalt take so long. But like, for example, in the case of NASA, we rank and evaluate things at the technical level, at the subtopic level, at the center level, and even at the mission directorate level to make really sure that the prioritization of all the awards fits our needs. So it's a pretty intensive process to make sure that we've got a good fit. Other federal agencies, I think, might be able to react a little bit quicker because we tend to be a bit tedious. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Alan Boyle with GeekWire, and I was curious, maybe a couple of linked questions. One, whether the policy initiatives from the White House affect the sorts of projects that you're looking at or the sorts of topics you concentrate on. And the other is how you work with NIAC, which is kind of a similar program to further technologies. Are there different takes that you and NIAC have on the sorts of things you support?
What our swim lanes are, basically. NIAC in general is more for the early advanced concepts, TRL 1 through 3, roughly speaking. Folks know technology readiness levels, I'm assuming, in the audience. Basically, 1 is I have an idea, but I don't know what to do with it. 9 is everything's all the way ready on the shelf, and you just plug and play, and you're off to the races. Everything's all developed. So anywhere between that spectrum is the different numbers. Now, traditionally, SBIR for us, TRL 3 to TRL 6 or TRL 7 is about what the SBIR program is really set up well for. NIAC is more for TRL 1 through 3, roughly speaking. There's some other differences too, but that's probably the best way of differentiating the two. Sorry?
Any effective policy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, your first question, which was how reactive are we to the policies set forth from White House and such. We've got a lag. In terms of the technical objectives that we put into the subtopic and receiving the technology back. I'll give you an example. If folks remember from a few years ago, we were very interested in retrieving an asteroid. We are now just finishing getting some of the technology from the subtopics that were related to that. So it's that much of a lag. So if there's some abrupt change in where the nation is heading in terms of space goals and such, it takes a while for it to percolate through the system, for sure. Next question.
Hi, I'm Nagar with SSL. You mentioned a Mentor-Protege Program,
Sure.
and I wanted to ask you a few questions related to that. What is NASA's interest in that program? Like, what are you expecting to receive as that, and what do you offer to help the Mentor-Protege Program? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure.
And maybe give examples of where it was successful and where it didn't work out.
The Mentor-Protege Program is ultimately a program between companies. What we're trying to do is we provide some incentives and some benefits for it. It's primarily run from the Office of Small Business Programs, OSBP, within NASA, although we try to make sure that SBIR companies are aware of it and have some participation in it as well. I'll give you an example. You may have a company that's very promising within the DoD world, a new startup company that looks like they have good technology, but they're completely new to the DoD world. Well, DoD also does Mentor-Protege, and I've seen examples where a existing company, a larger company within the DoD arena, will be able to help a small company figure out things like how you're dealing with security clearances, how you go and deal with sensitive material, classified material, stuff like that a new company might be really uninitiated. And that sort of a coaching basically helps it open new doors for that business. Although I should say, each and every mentor-protege relationship is a custom thing. And both the large company and the small company essentially need to have some sort of need in order to really make it work the best. There are incentives that are given to the larger company in terms of if they can help be a mentor for one of the smaller companies. There are incentives within the contracting world for the government that make it worth their while. To be frank, I'm not really sure specifically how it works out, but their small business subcontracting plans, for example, tend to look a lot better if they can point out that they're doing mentor-protege activities. It's more of a case-by-case kind of thing. But the one thing I have heard from is in almost every case, both parties really walk away happy with the arrangement. In fact, if you want some more information, I can get you a link from the OSBP to kind of to talk about that some more. And one last thing I just wanted to say, in the last few days, several of the different presenters have talked about why they're doing this sort of work. And I just want to leave you with a thought that, to me, this sort of activity, what we're doing, is a lot like what humanity has done in the past in terms of, if you see what happened in the Middle Ages when cathedrals were being built. It was an amazing thing because you'd have stonemasons who would work their entire life building these, or shaping these rocks into parts of a cathedral and stacking them and making sure that the walls would be straight. And it was completely acceptable for them. They were completely happy with the idea that their entire life they would work on a cathedral and they would never see it complete. And it was worth it for them. It was worth it for their kids to do it. That's what I think about the space industry. That's why a lot of us are in the business, is because it is such a monumental thing for humanity to be able to achieve this sort of capability, that it's worth it even to help push that rock up the hill just a little bit more. And then the other last parting thought, if you don't mind. When folks who aren't used to the space industry talk about why is there such interest in all this sort of stuff, one of the things I point out to them is I say, look, it's as if humanity is a turtle that is just poking its head out of its shell and realizing that it's on a 6-lane highway. What does that turtle do? Does the turtle just be okay with it and be worried about if it's going to get hit? Or does the turtle go and start to figure out how to move? And that's what a lot of this is like. As humanity learns more about the world around us, the universe around us, there's more and more reasons for us to try to control our own destiny and try to make sure that there's no particular one incident that could ever cause problems for humanity as a whole. And I think it's a very rewarding and long-term goal to have. So just want to leave you with that thought. Thank you.